I'm Diana, 34 years old, and I'm standing at my 7-year-old son's graveside watching my sister Vanessa place her hand on her stomach and announce to our grieving family that she's 4 months pregnant. The words hang in the air like poison as she smiles through crocodile tears, saying how Matthew would have wanted us to celebrate new life even in the midst of death. I feel my knees buckle, but before I can collapse, my husband Adrian's voice cuts through the fog of my grief with 4 words that shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. That's impossible, Vanessa. The cemetery falls silent except for the sound of wind moving through the oak trees. Adrian's hand tightens on my shoulder as he continues, his voice steady despite the tremor I can feel running through his body. You can't be 4 months pregnant because 4 months ago you had a complete hysterectomy at Portland General. I was the attending anesthesiologist. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The moment Adrian spoke those words, I watched my sister's face transform from practiced grief to something I'd never seen before. Raw panic. Our mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, while our father simply stared at Vanessa with an expression I couldn't quite read. My sister's husband, Kyle, turned to look at her with confusion written across his features, clearly having no idea what Adrian was talking about. The other mourners, maybe 30 people gathered around my baby's casket, shifted uncomfortably as the family drama unfolded in real time. I should explain how we got here, to this moment where my son's funeral became the stage for exposing my sister's lies. Matthew died 3 weeks ago in what the police called a tragic accident. He was riding his bike in our quiet neighborhood in Lake Oswego when a car ran a stop sign and struck him. The driver fled the scene. My beautiful, brilliant 7-year-old who loved dinosaurs and wanted to be a paleontologist was gone in an instant. The pain was so immense, so all-consuming, that I barely remember the first week. Adrian had to make all the arrangements because I couldn't function beyond existing in a fog of grief that felt like drowning. Vanessa had appeared at our house the day after Matthew died, arms full of casseroles and sympathy. She stayed for hours, crying alongside me, holding me when I couldn't hold myself together. She helped Adrian coordinate with the funeral home, called relatives to notify them, and even offered to write Matthew's obituary when I couldn't find the words. To anyone watching, she was the devoted younger sister, stepping up in my darkest hour. She spent every day at our house that first week, constantly by my side, offering comfort and support. But there had always been something off about Vanessa. Growing up in Salem, Oregon, we were the daughters of Thomas and Linda Ashford. My father was a high school principal, my mother a real estate agent. On the surface, we were a normal middle-class family. Beneath that surface, however, was a dynamic I'd never quite understood until much later. Vanessa, 3 years younger than me, had always required more attention, more reassurance, more everything. If I got an A on a test, she needed to get an A+. If I made the soccer team, she had to be captain of hers. When I was accepted to Oregon State University with a partial scholarship, Vanessa somehow managed to get into Stanford, though our parents went into significant debt to pay for it. The pattern continued into adulthood. I became a marine biologist working for the Oregon Coast Aquarium, doing research I loved on a modest salary. Vanessa became a pharmaceutical sales representative, constantly posting on social media about her 6-figure income and luxury lifestyle. When I married Adrian, a kind and steady anesthesiologist I'd met through a mutual friend, Vanessa dated a string of increasingly wealthy men before settling on Kyle, who owned a chain of car dealerships across the Pacific Northwest. Their wedding cost more than our first house. When Adrian and I struggled with infertility for 3 years before finally conceiving Matthew, Vanessa announced her own pregnancy just 2 months after I told the family I was expecting. She miscarried at 10 weeks, a loss I genuinely grieved with her, despite the tiny voice in my head that wondered about the timing. Over the years, she'd had 2 more miscarriages, each one announced shortly after some major event in my life, each one requiring extensive family support and attention. My therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, had gently suggested over the past year that Vanessa might have some deeper issues with our relationship. You describe a pattern where your achievements or happy moments seem to trigger some kind of competitive response in your sister, she'd observed during a session last spring. Have you considered that this might not be about you at all, but about something within her? I dismissed it at the time. Vanessa was my sister. She loved me. The competition was just sibling stuff, wasn't it? After Matthew was born, Vanessa's behavior became more complicated. She adored him, or seemed to. She bought him expensive gifts, volunteered to babysit, and posted endless photos of herself with him on social media with captions like "my favorite nephew" and "Auntie V" and "her best boy." But there were odd moments that stuck with me. Times when she'd make comments about my parenting choices that felt less like helpful advice and more like subtle criticism. The way she'd sometimes correct Matthew when he called me mommy in front of her, saying "remember to use your manners, Matthew," or "tell your mother she needs to brush your hair better." Adrian had noticed it too. "There's something about the way Vanessa looks at you when you're with Matthew," he'd mentioned once after a family dinner. "Like she's studying you, figuring something out." I'd laughed it off, but his observation had planted a seed of unease that grew slowly over the years. The day of Matthew's accident, Vanessa had actually been at our house. She'd stopped by unexpectedly around noon, saying she was in the neighborhood and wanted to see if I needed anything from the store. I'd been working from home that day, analyzing data from our latest SEAL population survey. Matthew had been at school. Vanessa stayed for about an hour, mostly on her phone, occasionally making small talk. She left around 1:30. Matthew was hit by the car at 3:15, just 2 blocks from our house. He'd been riding home from his friend Jacob's house, a route he'd taken dozens of times. The police investigation turned up nothing. No witnesses who could identify the car beyond it being a dark sedan, possibly black or navy blue. No security cameras in that particular stretch of residential street. The case went cold within days, filed away as a hit-and-run with no leads. I existed in a state of numb grief, barely able to process that my child was gone, let alone think about who had killed him or why they'd fled. Now, standing at his graveside with my sister's impossible pregnancy announcement hanging in the air and Adrian's revelation exposing it as a lie, something shifted inside me. Through the fog of grief, a terrible clarity began to emerge. Adrian, still holding my shoulder, addressed the gathered mourners with professional courtesy. "I apologize for the disruption. This is obviously not the time or place. Perhaps we should all take a moment." Our minister, Reverend Patricia Walsh, stepped forward smoothly. "Yes, let's reconvene at the Ashford home for the reception as planned. The family needs privacy." As people began to disperse, moving toward their cars with backward glances and whispered conversations, Vanessa tried to slip away with the crowd. "Mom," the hand on stomach posture dropped now that her announcement had been exposed. But our mother caught her arm. "Vanessa Marie, what is going on? You told me you were pregnant. You showed me the ultrasound photo." Vanessa's eyes darted between our parents, Kyle, Adrian, and me. "It was a mistake. I misspoke. I'm not 4 months, I'm only 6 weeks. The ultrasound was from a friend who's pregnant. I just wanted something to show you all." Adrian's voice was gentle but firm. "Vanessa, you can't be any amount of pregnant. You had a total hysterectomy 4 months ago. I was there. Dr. Richmond performed the surgery. You had severe endometriosis and adenomyosis. We removed your uterus, both ovaries, and your fallopian tubes." Kyle's face had gone white. "What? Vanessa, you told me you had your appendix out. You said that's why you were in the hospital for 3 days." My sister's face crumpled and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then she turned to me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd seen before but never named. Calculation. "This is all your fault, Diana. You always have to be the center of attention. Even at your own son's funeral, you can't let me have one moment." The accusation was so absurd, so perfectly inverted from reality, that I actually laughed. A short, bitter sound that surprised even me. My fault? "Vanessa, you announced a fake pregnancy at my child's funeral. What exactly was I supposed to do?" Our father, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Vanessa, go wait in the car. We'll discuss this at home." But as my sister walked away, her shoulders shaking with what might have been sobs or might have been rage, I found myself noticing details I'd overlooked before. The way she glanced back at Matthew's casket, not with grief but with something else. The way her hands clenched into fists. The way she pulled out her phone before she'd even reached the parking lot. Adrian drove us home in silence, his hand occasionally reaching over to squeeze mine. Our house in Lake Oswego felt empty and wrong without Matthew's presence. His backpack still hung on the hook by the door. His dinosaur drawings covered the refrigerator. His voice seemed to echo in every room, and its absence was a physical pain. I sank onto the couch while Adrian went to make tea, a familiar ritual that now felt hollow. When he returned, carrying 2 mugs, he sat beside me and took my hand. "Diana, I need to tell you something. When Vanessa had her surgery, she made me promise not to tell anyone. She said she was embarrassed, that she didn't want the family to know she could never have biological children. I respected her privacy. But what she did today, that crosses every line." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I stared into my tea, watching the steam rise. Why would she lie about being pregnant? Especially today, especially now? Adrian was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. But I've been concerned about Vanessa for a while. There have been other things, small things that didn't seem important individually." "What things?" He hesitated. "You know I can't usually discuss patients. But Vanessa isn't really my patient. I was just covering for Dr. Richmond that day. And given what just happened, I think you need to know. About 6 months ago, Vanessa came to the hospital claiming to have severe abdominal pain. Dr. Richmond examined her and found nothing physically wrong. He recommended she see a therapist. She became enraged, accused him of calling her crazy, and stormed out. Then she filed a formal complaint against him with the medical board, claiming he'd dismissed her legitimate concerns. My head snapped up. She never mentioned any of that. The complaint was dismissed after a review found Dr. Richmond had followed proper protocol. But Diana, the pattern of behavior, seeking attention through medical crises, making accusations when she doesn't get the response she wants, it's concerning. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "We need to talk as a family. Tomorrow, our house, 10 a.m. Please come. Your father and I have some things to share about Vanessa." I showed the message to Adrian, who nodded slowly. "I think you should go. But Diana, I want you to be prepared for the possibility that what you learn might be difficult." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in Matthew's room, surrounded by his things, and let myself feel the full weight of my loss. My baby was gone. Nothing would change that. But as grief washed over me in waves, something else began to surface. Questions. Why had Vanessa been at my house the day Matthew died? Why had she stayed for an hour when she claimed to just be stopping by? Why had she been so insistent on helping with the funeral arrangements, to the point of taking over tasks I hadn't asked her to do? And why would she announce a fake pregnancy at her nephew's funeral? I got up and went to my home office, turning on my computer. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I began searching through my emails, looking for any correspondence with Vanessa over the past few months. What I found was strange. Multiple emails from her asking about Matthew's schedule, his after-school activities, which friends he played with most often. At the time, I'd assumed she was just being an involved aunt. Now, reading them again, they felt different. Calculating. Information gathering. There was an email from 2 months ago where she'd asked specifically about Matthew's bike route to Jacob's house. "You really let him ride alone? That seems dangerous, Diana. What if something happened?" I'd responded defensively, explaining that it was only 4 blocks, that Matthew knew to be careful, that I couldn't helicopter parent him forever. She'd replied, "Of course, you're the mother. I'm sure you know best." The passive aggression I'd missed before now seemed glaring. I dug deeper, opening my photo albums on my phone. There were hundreds of pictures of Matthew, of course. But I started looking specifically for ones that included Vanessa. What I noticed made my blood run cold. In almost every photo where Vanessa held Matthew or stood with him, she was looking at the camera, not at him. Her smile was perfect, practiced. But in the candid shots, the ones where she didn't know anyone was photographing her, her expression while watching Matthew was different. Not loving. Envious. Sometimes even resentful. There was one photo from Matthew's 6th birthday party that stopped me. I'd taken it accidentally, catching Vanessa in the background while trying to photograph Matthew blowing out his candles. The look on her face as she watched him, surrounded by family and friends singing, was unmistakable. Hatred. Pure, undisguised hatred. How had I never seen it before? How had I looked at this photo dozens of times and never registered what was right there in front of me? Adrian found me at 3 in the morning, still at my computer, surrounded by printouts of emails and photos spread across the desk. Diana, you need sleep. I can't sleep. Adrian, look at this. Look at her face in this picture. He studied the photo, and I saw his jaw tighten. When did you take this? His 6th birthday. 8 months ago. He sat down heavily in the chair next to me. Diana, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that I've been blind. I'm thinking that Vanessa's behavior has been escalating for years and I dismissed it as normal sibling stuff. I'm thinking that she was at my house the day Matthew died and I never questioned why. The words hung between us, too terrible to fully voice yet impossible to ignore. Adrian reached for my hand. We need to be very careful here. Grief can make us see patterns that aren't there, connections that don't exist. But even as he said it, I could see in his eyes that he was thinking the same thing I was. The police said it was a dark sedan, I said quietly. What kind of car does Vanessa drive? Adrian's face went pale. A navy blue Mercedes. But Diana, that doesn't mean anything. Lots of people drive dark sedans. I know. But I need to know the truth. I need to understand what's been happening in my family. If there's even a chance that Vanessa had something to do with Matthew's death, I have to find out. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, typical Oregon weather that matched my mood. Adrian and I drove to my parents' house in Salem, neither of us speaking much. My mother and father lived in the same modest split level where Vanessa and I had grown up, the house filled with decades of family memories that now felt contaminated by suspicion. My parents were waiting in the living room, both looking like they'd aged 10 years overnight. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed from crying, and my father's usual upright posture had collapsed into a defeated slump. Vanessa wasn't there, which was a relief. I didn't think I could look at her without screaming. Mom spoke first, her voice shaking. Diana, Adrian, thank you for coming. Your father and I spent all night talking, and we've decided you need to know some things about Vanessa. Things we should have addressed years ago. My father picked up the thread. Your sister has been in therapy on and off since she was 14. She was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and narcissistic traits. The doctors said she had an unstable sense of self, intense fears of abandonment, and difficulty with empathy. We tried medication, different therapists, everything we could think of. For a while, things seemed better. But the patterns never really went away. They just became more subtle. I felt like I'd been punched. 14. You've known since she was 14 and you never told me? My mother's hands twisted in her lap. The therapist said it wouldn't be helpful to label her to the family. That it might make things worse if she felt stigmatized. So we tried to manage it quietly, to protect both of you. Protect both of us? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Mom, she announced a fake pregnancy at my son's funeral. How exactly did keeping this secret protect anyone? There's more, my father said heavily. Vanessa has lied about being pregnant before. Multiple times. The miscarriages she told you about, at least 2 of them never happened. She fabricated medical records, showed us fake ultrasounds. We only found out when one of the doctors she claimed to be seeing called us, concerned because Vanessa had been harassing the office, demanding they confirm a pregnancy that didn't exist. The room spun. When was this? About 4 years ago. We confronted her, got her back into therapy. She seemed to accept that she had a problem. She promised to stop. We thought she had. Adrian leaned forward. Mr. and Mrs. Ashford, did you know about Vanessa's hysterectomy? They both nodded. She told us she didn't want anyone else to know, especially Diana. She said she was embarrassed that she'd never be able to have children while you had Matthew. We agreed to keep her confidence. Now I see that was a mistake. A mistake, I repeated hollowly. My sister has a diagnosed personality disorder, a history of faking pregnancies, and you didn't think I should know any of this? My mother finally broke down completely. We thought we were doing the right thing. The therapists kept saying she could get better with treatment, that family support was crucial. We didn't want to turn you against your own sister. But Adrian's question cut through the emotion in the room like a knife. Has Vanessa ever been violent? My parents exchanged a look that told me everything before my father even spoke. When she was 16, she attacked Diana. Do you remember that, Diana? You said you fell down the stairs, but you didn't fall. Vanessa pushed you during an argument. You broke your arm. The memory came flooding back with crystal clarity. I'd told everyone I fell because Vanessa had been so sorry, so devastated by what she'd done. She'd cried and apologized and begged me not to tell. And I'd protected her. Just like our parents had been protecting her for years. What were you arguing about? Adrian asked quietly. I looked at my mother, and saw in her eyes that she knew. She knew and had never said anything. Tell him, I said. Mom, tell him what we were fighting about. My mother's voice was barely a whisper. Diana had just found out she got into Oregon State with a scholarship. Vanessa was angry because she thought Thomas and I were more proud of Diana. She said Diana always got more attention, more praise. During the argument, she pushed Diana down the stairs. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. Every achievement in my life, every moment of happiness or success, had been met with some crisis or drama from Vanessa that redirected the family's attention to her. And we'd all enabled it, over and over again, for nearly 20 years. I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth, I said, my voice steady despite the terror running through me. Where was Vanessa on the day Matthew died? My parents looked at each other again. She said she was with you, my father said slowly. That she'd stopped by your house that morning. She was with me for about an hour, from noon to 1:30. But Matthew wasn't hit until 3:15. Where was she between 1:30 and 3:15? My mother stood up abruptly. I'll call her. She needs to answer this. No, I said sharply. Don't call her. Don't tell her we're asking questions. If Vanessa had anything to do with what happened to Matthew, I don't want her to know we're suspicious. Adrian squeezed my hand. Diana, we need to be very careful about accusations like this. We're talking about your sister potentially being involved in your son's death. That's an enormous leap from fake pregnancy announcements and childhood violence. He was right, but something deep in my gut told me I was onto something. I turned to my parents. I need to know everything. Every lie, every manipulation, every concerning incident. If we're going to understand what's happening with Vanessa, I need the complete picture. What followed was 3 hours of painful revelations. My parents walked us through years of Vanessa's behavior that they'd hidden or minimized. The time she'd convinced a teacher I was plagiarizing my papers by showing her essays she'd written in my style. The boyfriend of mine who broke up with me after Vanessa told him I'd cheated, which I hadn't. The job opportunity I'd lost when someone anonymously sent my potential employer false information about my qualifications, information only Vanessa would have known. The pattern was undeniable. Every significant moment in my life had been shadowed by some act of sabotage from Vanessa, carefully disguised to look like coincidence or bad luck. But there was something else my parents revealed that made my blood run cold. About 2 years ago, Vanessa had become obsessed with the idea that Matthew loved her more than he loved me. She would tell us how he called her his favorite person, how he said he wished she was his mother instead of Diana. My mother's voice broke as she continued. We told her she was misinterpreting normal child behavior. Matthew adored you, Diana. Anyone could see that. But Vanessa became convinced that you were turning him against her, that you were jealous of their bond. I remembered those comments now. Vanessa had indeed mentioned several times that Matthew had said things like that, but when I'd asked him about it, he'd looked confused. Aunt Vanessa is nice, but you're my mom. I love you the most, he'd said simply, with the straightforward honesty of a 7-year-old. I'd mentioned this to Vanessa, thinking it would reassure her, but instead she'd become cold and distant for weeks afterward. Now I understood why. In her disordered mind, I wasn't just his mother. I was the obstacle between her and what she wanted. Adrian had gone very still beside me. Mr. Ashford, Mrs. Ashford, I need to ask this directly. Do you think Vanessa is capable of harming Matthew? My father's silence was answer enough, but my mother shook her head violently. No. She's troubled, yes. She's lied and manipulated, yes. But she loved Matthew. She would never hurt a child. Except she did hurt a child, I said quietly. She hurt me when I was a child. She pushed me down the stairs hard enough to break my arm. What makes you think she wouldn't hurt Matthew if she felt he'd chosen me over her? The question hung in the air like smoke. My mother had no answer. After we left my parents' house, Adrian and I sat in the car for a long time without starting the engine. The rain had picked up, drumming steadily on the roof. Finally, Adrian spoke. What do you want to do? I want to find out the truth. I want to know where Vanessa was when Matthew was killed. I want to know if my sister murdered my son. The words felt impossible even as I said them, but I couldn't unsay them now. They were out there, real and terrible. We need to be smart about this, Adrian said. If you're right, if Vanessa was involved, we can't tip her off. We need evidence. Real evidence that the police can use. I nodded, my mind already racing. Vanessa's phone records would show where she was. Her car might have damage from hitting Matthew. There might be surveillance cameras we didn't know about. But I couldn't exactly ask the police to investigate my sister based on a hunch and a history of personality disorders. I needed something concrete. Over the next week, while I continued to move through the motions of grief, planning a memorial service and sorting through Matthew's things with tears streaming down my face, I also began quietly investigating my sister. I started with social media, going through Vanessa's posts from the day Matthew died. She'd posted a selfie that morning at 11:30, taken in her car with the caption running errands, such a beautiful day. The location tag showed she was in West Lynn, about 15 minutes from my house in Lake Oswego. The next post wasn't until 7 that evening, a somber message about Matthew's death with the caption "My heart is shattered." That precious boy was everything to me. I checked Kyle's social media next. He'd posted a photo of lunch that day at 1:45, tagged at a restaurant in downtown Portland, about 30 minutes from our neighborhood. So Kyle had an alibi for the time of the accident. But Vanessa's whereabouts between 1:30 when she left my house and 7 that evening were unaccounted for. I reached out to Detective Carmen Rodriguez, who'd been assigned to Matthew's case. I kept my tone casual, just a grieving mother checking in. Any updates on the investigation? I asked when she returned my call. Detective Rodriguez's voice was sympathetic but not hopeful. I'm sorry, Mrs. Brennan. We've followed every lead we have. Without witnesses or camera footage, we're at a standstill. Unless someone comes forward with information, the case will likely remain unsolved. I hesitated, then decided to test the waters carefully. Have you looked at all possible cameras in the area? Traffic cameras, doorbell cameras, anything? We checked every camera within a 3-block radius. Unfortunately, that particular stretch of Oak Meadow Drive has very few houses with security systems, and the angle of the ones that exist didn't capture the street. What about cell phone records? Could you tell if there were any phones in the area at the time? Detective Rodriguez paused. Mrs. Brennan, may I ask why you're asking these specific questions? Do you have information about the accident? I backpedaled quickly. No, nothing concrete. I've just been trying to understand what happened. Trying to make sense of it. I understand. And I want you to know we're still working the case, even though it's gone cold. If you think of anything at all that might be relevant, please call me immediately. After I hung up, I sat staring at my phone. I couldn't go to the police with nothing but suspicions and family history. I needed proof. That's when I remembered something. Vanessa's car. If she'd hit Matthew, there would be damage. Maybe not obvious damage, but something. A dent, a scratch, paint transfer. I called Margaret Preston, my best friend since college who worked as an insurance adjuster. She'd been incredibly supportive since Matthew's death, bringing meals and sitting with me when the grief felt like drowning. Margaret, I need a favor, I said when she answered. It's going to sound strange, but I need you to trust me. Anything, Diana. What do you need? I need you to look at a car and tell me if it's been in an accident recently. Whose car? My sister's. There was a pause. Is this about what happened at the funeral? Because Adrian told me what Vanessa did. I'm so sorry. This is about more than the fake pregnancy announcement. I can't explain everything yet, but I think Vanessa might have been involved in Matthew's death. Margaret sucked in a sharp breath. Diana, that's a serious accusation. I know. That's why I need to be sure. Will you help me? She agreed to meet me the next day. We decided to make it look casual, running into Vanessa at the grocery store parking lot where she did her weekly shopping every Thursday morning. Margaret would accidentally bump into Vanessa's car with her shopping cart, creating an opportunity to examine it closely while apologizing profusely. It was a simple plan, but it might give us the information we needed. Thursday morning, I waited in my car 3 rows away while Margaret positioned herself near the entrance. At 10:15, right on schedule, Vanessa's navy Mercedes pulled into the lot. I watched through binoculars as my sister got out, checking her appearance in the car window before heading into the store. She was wearing designer workout clothes and oversized sunglasses, her hair in a perfect ponytail. She looked nothing like a woman who just buried her nephew or been exposed for faking a pregnancy. She looked irritated, put upon, like this grocery shopping errand was a tiresome obligation. Margaret waited 5 minutes, then made her move. I watched as she pretended to struggle with a full shopping cart, letting it roll into the front passenger side of Vanessa's car with a visible impact. Margaret immediately began examining the car, running her hands over the bumper and fender, taking photos with her phone while looking around as if checking for witnesses. She texted me 3 minutes later. Front passenger side has recent repairs. Paint doesn't quite match. Professional job, but recent. And there's a small dent in the front bumper that wasn't fixed. Consistent with hitting something at low speed. My hands shook as I read the message. It wasn't proof, not yet. But it was something. I texted back. Can you tell how recent? Another message came through. Paintwork is less than a month old. I'd bet money on it. I sat back in my seat, my heart pounding. Matthew had been killed 3 weeks ago. If Vanessa had her car repaired shortly after his death, that was too much of a coincidence. I needed to find out where she'd had the work done. That evening, I did something I'm not proud of. I went to Vanessa's house while she and Kyle were at a charity dinner they'd mentioned on Facebook. I knew where they kept their spare key, under a fake rock by the back door. I'd watered their plants and collected their mail enough times during their vacations. As I let myself into their pristine Bethany neighborhood home, my heart hammered with equal parts fear and determination. If I got caught, I had no explanation that would hold up. But I had to know. I went straight to Vanessa's home office, a converted bedroom she'd decorated in shades of cream and gold. Her desk was meticulously organized, everything in labeled folders and matching containers. I started with her file cabinet, looking for anything car-related. In a folder marked Auto, I found maintenance records for both her Mercedes and Kyle's truck. The most recent entry for her car made me sit down hard in her desk chair. Anderson's Auto Body, 4 days after Matthew's death. Front end repair, $2,300. I took photos of the receipt with my phone, my hands shaking so badly I had to brace my elbows on the desk to keep the image from blurring. Then I kept looking. Vanessa was organized to a fault. If there was evidence of what she'd done, it would be documented somewhere. I found her planner next, a leather-bound book where she tracked everything from workout sessions to social engagements. I flipped back to the day Matthew died. Her schedule showed the stop at my house from noon to 1, marked simply Diana's, check-in. But there was another entry at 3 o'clock that made my blood freeze. OM Drive, followed by a small checkmark. Oak Meadow Drive. The street where Matthew was killed. She'd planned it. She'd actually written it in her planner like it was just another errand. I took photos of the page, forcing myself to breathe through the rage and horror washing over me. But I needed more. I needed something that proved intent, something undeniable. I moved to her computer, which thankfully wasn't password protected. She was logged into her email, and I started searching through her messages. What I found was worse than I could have imagined. There were emails to herself, a kind of digital diary she'd been keeping for years. I searched for Matthew's name and found hundreds of entries. The earliest ones were relatively benign, comments about how cute he was, how much she enjoyed being his aunt. But as he got older, the tone changed. January, 2 years ago. Matthew told Linda he wants to be a scientist like his mommy. She's poisoning him against me. Making him think she's so special. Last June. Watched Diana with Matthew at his school play. Everyone fawning over them. The perfect mother and son. It makes me sick. She doesn't deserve him. The entries became increasingly disturbing. December, 5 months ago. Matthew said he didn't want to come to my house for Christmas cookie baking because he'd rather stay home with Diana. I gave him everything and this is how he repays me. He's just like her. Ungrateful. The final entry was dated 3 days before Matthew's death. I can't do this anymore. Watching her have everything I want. The perfect child who loves her unconditionally. The happy little family. She took my ability to have children. The least she could do is share hers. But no, she has to flaunt it. Has to make sure everyone knows Matthew loves her most. Something has to change. I was crying as I photographed the screen, barely able to see through my tears. My sister had killed my son. Not in a moment of passion or an accident, but deliberately. She'd planned it, executed it, and then shown up at my house to comfort me. She'd helped plan his funeral while knowing she was the one who'd taken him from me. The betrayal was so enormous, so incomprehensible, that I felt like I was fragmenting into pieces. I forced myself to keep looking. There had to be more. I found a folder on her desktop labeled personal that contained dozens of photos. Most were of Matthew, photos I recognized from family gatherings and some I didn't, candid shots she must have taken without my knowledge. But there were others too. Photos of my house at different times of day. Photos of Matthew's school. Photos of the route from his friend Jacob's house to our home, including the stretch of Oak Meadow Drive where he'd been killed. In a subfolder labeled Research, I found something that made me physically ill. Vanessa had been studying hit-and-run cases. There were saved articles about how to avoid leaving evidence, what kind of damage to expect when hitting a pedestrian or cyclist, how police investigate these cases. She'd even bookmarked a forum where people discussed the physics of vehicle-bicycle collisions. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was premeditated murder. I heard a car in the driveway and my heart nearly stopped. They were home early. I quickly closed all the windows on the computer, shoved the planner back where I'd found it, and looked around frantically to make sure I hadn't disturbed anything else. I heard Kyle's voice in the garage. Forgot my wallet. I'll just run in and grab it. I had maybe 30 seconds. I raced to the back door, slipped out, and replaced the fake rock with the key just as I heard the door from the garage to the kitchen open. I pressed myself against the side of the house in the shadows, praying Kyle wouldn't come outside for any reason. Through the window, I could see him moving around the kitchen, then heading back toward the garage. A moment later, I heard his car start and pull away. Vanessa must have stayed in the car. I waited another 5 minutes, my heart pounding, before carefully making my way around the side of the house to where I'd parked my car a block away. Only when I was safely inside with the doors locked did I let myself fall apart, sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. Adrian found me an hour later, still sitting in the car in our driveway. He helped me inside and held me while I showed him what I'd found. We sat at the kitchen table going through the photos on my phone, the evidence of my sister's calculated murder of our son. Adrian's face was ashen, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. "We have to go to the police," he said finally. "Diana, this is enough. This is more than enough." But I shook my head. Some of this evidence might not be admissible. I broke into her house. I accessed her computer without permission. A good lawyer could argue it's all fruit of the poisonous tree. We need to be smarter than that. I need to make sure Vanessa pays for what she did, and that means doing this right. We called Margaret and asked her to come over. When she arrived and saw what we'd found, she went pale. "Oh my God, Diana. Your sister is a monster. How do we make sure she doesn't get away with this?" The three of us spent the rest of the night strategizing. Adrian wanted to go straight to Detective Rodriguez with everything, but Margaret and I talked him into a more careful approach. We needed to create a situation where Vanessa would incriminate herself, where the evidence would be clean and undeniable. Margaret had an idea. What if we confront her, but do it with the police listening? We could get her to confess on tape. It's risky, but if we do it right, we'd have everything we need. I thought about it. Vanessa's arrogance had always been her weakness. She believed she was smarter than everyone around her, that she could manipulate any situation to her advantage. If we set the trap correctly, she might walk right into it. But we needed Detective Rodriguez's cooperation, and that meant revealing what I'd done. The next morning, I called Detective Rodriguez and asked to meet with her in person. When Adrian and I sat down in her office at the Portland Police Bureau, I laid out everything. The personality disorder diagnosis. The history of violence and manipulation. The timeline of where Vanessa was the day Matthew died. The car repair. And finally, I confessed to breaking into her house and what I'd found there. Detective Rodriguez listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and studied me for a long moment. "Mrs. Brennan, you know that evidence obtained illegally isn't admissible in court." "I know. That's why I'm here. I need your help to do this the right way." She tapped her pen on her desk. "What you've shown me is compelling, but it's all circumstantial. The diary entries are disturbing, but they don't explicitly describe planning or committing murder. The car repair could be explained away. Even the entry in her planner could mean anything. We need a confession, or we need physical evidence that ties her car to the scene." "Is there any way to test her car for evidence now?" Adrian asked. "If she hit Matthew, there might still be traces. Paint transfer, fabric from his clothes, something." Detective Rodriguez shook her head. "Not without probable cause for a warrant, and right now we don't have that. Everything Mrs. Brennan found was obtained illegally. I can't use it to justify a search." "But," she continued, leaning forward, "if Vanessa were to confess, even partially, in a recorded conversation with her sister, that would give us what we need." "So you'll help us?" I asked. Detective Rodriguez nodded slowly. "I'll help you. But we do this by the book. No more breaking and entering, no more illegal searches. We'll wire you up, set up a meeting with your sister, and see if we can get her to incriminate herself. And Mrs. Brennan, I need you to understand that this might not work. Your sister might not confess. She might say nothing incriminating. If that happens, we're back to square one. I understand. But I have to try." I know my sister. I know how her mind works. If I approach this right, she'll want to brag. She'll want me to know how clever she's been. Over the next few days, Detective Rodriguez worked with the district attorney's office to set up the operation. They decided the best approach was for me to invite Vanessa to our house under the pretense of reconciliation. I would tell her I wanted to talk about what happened at the funeral, that I understood she was struggling and wanted to help repair our relationship. It was exactly the kind of thing Vanessa would expect from me, the perpetually forgiving older sister. The hardest part was acting normal in the meantime. Vanessa had been texting me, alternating between apologies for the funeral incident and accusations that I was turning the family against her. "Our parents are barely speaking to me because of you," one text read. "I hope you're happy that you've destroyed our family." I forced myself to respond calmly, playing the role I'd always played. "I'm not trying to destroy anything, Vanessa. I just think we all need some time to process everything that's happened." Finally, I sent the text that would set everything in motion. "Can you come over tomorrow? I think we should talk, just the two of us. There are things I want to understand." Her response came within minutes. "Of course. I've been waiting for you to reach out. I'll be there at 2. Adrian wanted to be present, hidden somewhere in the house, but Detective Rodriguez vetoed it. "Your sister knows this house. She'll sense if something is off. It needs to be just Diana, doing what she's always done, trying to understand and forgive." The day of the meeting, technicians came early to set up recording equipment. They hid microphones in the living room where Vanessa and I would talk, positioned cameras in ways that wouldn't be obvious. Detective Rodriguez would be in an unmarked van outside with 2 other officers, monitoring everything in real time. If at any point they felt I was in danger, they'd intervene immediately. But the goal was to let the conversation play out, to give Vanessa enough rope to hang herself with. I practiced what I would say, how I would guide the conversation. Dr. Chen, my therapist, had coached me on how to appeal to Vanessa's narcissism, how to make her feel safe enough to reveal the truth. People with her particular pathology often want recognition for their cleverness, Dr. Chen had explained. If you can make her feel like you're finally seeing how brilliant she is, she might open up in ways that incriminate her. At 1:45, I was sitting on the couch, wearing a wire under my sweater, my palms sweating despite the cool temperature in the room. Adrian had gone to stay with his parents for the afternoon. He'd kissed me goodbye that morning, holding me tight. "Be careful. If she did this, if she really killed Matthew, she's capable of anything." "I know. But I need to do this. For Matthew." At exactly 2 o'clock, I heard Vanessa's car in the driveway. Through the window, I watched her check her appearance in the rearview mirror before getting out. She was carrying a small gift bag, probably some peace offering meant to manipulate me into forgiveness. I took a deep breath and opened the door before she could knock. "Vanessa," I said, and was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Thanks for coming." "Diana," she said, and immediately her eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry about everything. I don't know what's been wrong with me lately. The stress of trying to get pregnant, the fertility treatments that failed, I think I just lost my mind a little bit." I gestured for her to come in, closing the door behind her. "I know it's been hard for you." I poured us each a glass of wine, making sure to position us on the couch where the hidden cameras would capture everything. Vanessa took a sip and seemed to relax slightly. "I brought you something," she said, pushing the gift bag toward me. "Just a little something to show you I care." I opened the bag to find a silver picture frame with a photo of Matthew I'd never seen before. It was from Vanessa's perspective, Matthew looking up at the camera with a genuine smile. "When did you take this?" I asked, studying the image. "A few weeks before the accident," she said softly. "We were at the park. He was telling me about some dinosaur discovery he'd read about. He was so excited." I set the frame down carefully, feeling the wire against my skin like a brand. "Vanessa, I need to ask you something and I need you to be honest with me." She tensed slightly but nodded. "Of course. Anything. Where were you that afternoon?" "The day Matthew died." After you left my house. Her face went carefully blank. I told you. I ran some errands and then went home. What errands specifically? Because I've been trying to understand the timeline. You left around 1:30. Matthew was hit at 3:15. But you didn't post anything on social media until 7 that night. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Why are you asking me this? Are you actually accusing me of something? I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm trying to understand what happened that day. Every detail matters to me. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. This is unbelievable. My nephew dies and you're interrogating me like I'm a suspect. I watched her carefully, remembering Dr. Chen's advice. You're right. I'm sorry. It's just that I feel so lost. Like there are pieces missing, and if I could just understand everything that happened that day, maybe I could find some peace. She turned back to me, her expression softening. I get that. I really do. But Diana, I was just running errands. I went to the dry cleaners, stopped at the pharmacy. Nothing significant. The dry cleaners and pharmacy would have records, timestamps. Detective Rodriguez could check those. But I needed more. I took a different approach. You know what's been haunting me? The fact that Matthew's last bike ride was on a route he'd taken dozens of times. Like someone knew exactly where he'd be. Vanessa went very still. What are you saying? I'm saying it feels too coincidental. And then at the funeral, when you announced that pregnancy, Adrian said something about your surgery. I didn't know you'd had a hysterectomy, Vanessa. Why didn't you tell me? She sat back down, her hands clenched in her lap. Because it was humiliating, okay? Knowing I'd never have children while you had Matthew. Perfect Matthew who everyone adored. Do you have any idea what that felt like? To watch you have everything I wanted? There it was, the resentment breaking through. I pushed a little harder. I never meant to hurt you by having Matthew. He loved you too. You were his favorite aunt. She laughed, a bitter sound. His favorite aunt. But never his mother. That's what I wanted, Diana. To be someone's mother. To have a child look at me the way Matthew looked at you. And you just got to have that without even trying, without even appreciating how lucky you were. I struggled to keep my voice calm. What do you mean I didn't appreciate it? Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes intense. You were always complaining about how tired you were, how hard parenting was. You sent him to after-school programs instead of spending every moment with him. You didn't deserve him. The words hung between us, loaded with meaning. Vanessa seemed to realize she'd said too much because she sat back quickly. I didn't mean that. I'm just emotional. But I couldn't let it go now. You said I didn't deserve him. Past tense. Like he's gone because I didn't deserve him. Did you think someone else deserved him more? She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the calculation happening behind her eyes. She was deciding how much to reveal, how much she could say without fully incriminating herself. Diana, do you really want to know what I think? Yes. I really do. I think Matthew's death was karmic justice. I think you took for granted what you had, and the universe corrected that imbalance. My breath caught. You think the universe killed my son? Or did you help the universe along? Her face transformed then, the mask of sisterly concern dropping away completely. You're so clever, aren't you? Always were. But you know what? You're not clever enough. Because even if I did know something about what happened that day, even if I had been there, you can't prove anything. So you were there. I kept my voice steady despite my racing heart. Vanessa smiled, a chilling expression that held no warmth. I didn't say that. I said even if I was. Hypothetically speaking. But hypothetically, if someone wanted to teach you a lesson about appreciating what you have, Oak Meadow Drive would be the perfect place. Quiet street, no cameras, predictable route. A dark car coming around that blind corner just as a little boy on a bike passed by. It would look like an accident. I felt tears streaming down my face, but I forced myself to keep going. And hypothetically, that person would need to get their car fixed afterward. Front end damage from hitting a bicycle. Vanessa's smile faltered slightly. You've been busy. Breaking into my house, I assume. Going through my things? That's illegal, Diana. Anything you found wouldn't be admissible in court. Maybe not. But the police could get a warrant now. They could test your car for paint transfer, for fabric from Matthew's clothes. They could pull security footage from the dry cleaners and pharmacy you claimed to visit that day. She stood up again, but this time there was panic in her movements. You're bluffing. You have nothing. I have enough. I have your repair records. I have your diary entries about how much you resented Matthew. I have your search history about hit-and-run investigations. But most importantly, I have this conversation. Everything you've said in the last 10 minutes has been recorded. Vanessa's face went white. You're wearing a wire. The police are listening right now. I nodded, standing to face her. Every word, Vanessa. Every admission. Even hypothetically speaking, you've given them enough for a warrant. And once they test your car, once they pull all the evidence I found, you're done. She moved toward me and for a moment I thought she might attack me, but the front door opened and Detective Rodriguez walked in with 2 uniformed officers behind her. Vanessa Ashford, you're under arrest for the murder of Matthew Brennan. You have the right to remain silent. As they read her rights and placed her in handcuffs, Vanessa started screaming. You can't do this. I didn't confess to anything. It was all hypothetical. But her protests faded as they led her out to the patrol car. I sank onto the couch, shaking uncontrollably. Detective Rodriguez sat beside me. You did good, Mrs. Brennan. We have everything we need. The trial took 8 months to begin. In that time, police examined Vanessa's car and found microscopic traces of paint from Matthew's bicycle embedded in the front bumper. They pulled security footage from a gas station 3 blocks from Oak Meadow Drive showing Vanessa's Mercedes at 3:10 on the day of the accident, heading in the direction of where Matthew was killed. They interviewed the auto body shop and confirmed the damage was consistent with striking a cyclist. And they presented the recorded conversation where Vanessa had essentially confessed, even couched in hypothetical language. My parents attended every day of the trial, sitting behind me in silent support. They'd finally had to confront what their daughter had become, the monster they'd enabled by keeping her secrets for so long. My mother aged years in those months, the guilt of knowing she could have prevented this if she'd been honest with me about Vanessa's diagnosis, her history, her capacity for violence. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning a verdict of guilty of second-degree murder. Vanessa was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Now, 2 years later, I'm rebuilding my life. Adrian and I are still together, though the trauma of losing Matthew and discovering the truth about Vanessa tested our marriage in ways I never imagined. We're in therapy, working through the grief and guilt. I started a foundation in Matthew's name that provides support for families dealing with violence from relatives with personality disorders. We work to break the cycle of secrecy that allows abuse and manipulation to flourish in families like mine. My relationship with my parents is complicated. We see each other occasionally, usually at Martha's grave. My mother died 6 months after the trial, her heart giving out under the weight of her guilt. My father and I are slowly, carefully rebuilding trust. He's in therapy too, learning how his conflict avoidance and enabling damaged both his daughters in different ways. Vanessa writes me letters from prison that I don't read. They sit in a box in my closet, unopened. Maybe someday I'll be ready to hear what she has to say, but that day hasn't come yet. I think about Matthew every day. The weight of his absence never gets lighter, I've just gotten stronger at carrying it. But I've also learned something important through this nightmare. That family loyalty doesn't mean protecting people from the consequences of their actions. That keeping secrets to maintain peace actually destroys it. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is tell the truth, no matter how painful it is. My sister killed my son, and I made sure she paid for it. That's not revenge. That's justice. And it's the last thing I could do for Matthew, to make sure the truth came out and the person responsible was held accountable. The shattered champagne glass at Sophia's wedding in someone else's story, the dramatic revelation, the methodical uncovering of betrayal, they're not so different from my own journey. We all have moments where the facade cracks and we see the truth we've been avoiding. The question is what we do with that truth once we see it. I chose to follow it wherever it led, even when it led to the most painful discovery imaginable. And I'd make that choice again, because Matthew deserved nothing less than the complete truth about how he died and who took him from us. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.